going to go over two of the chapters, 37 and 38. My name is Isabel Ringer. I teach the Torah every Sunday by teleconference. So if you want to get in on the Torah studies on Sunday afternoons at 1:15, talk to me. I also teach the Torah at the synagogue, Kabi, Congregation Ahaves Beit Israel, in Boise. So I've already taught this portion last Sunday, so I should be in good shape, right? Okay, so I'm going to go through what I'm teaching on a certain section, and then I'm going to be open to questions. That's how I generally teach. Okay, so 37:1 has a significant word. It says, Yaakov settled. Boy, there's a dangerous word. I've learned that in my own life. Whenever I settle, God has a different plan. I don't know if that's your experience. He thought he would settle down now, but that wasn't going to happen. So Joseph is 17. That is his correct name. And he's hanging out with handmaidens, the sons of the handmaidens. The sons of Leah want nothing to do with this upstart, this cocky kid. I don't know if you remember being 17, but I knew it all. And I told my mother that I did know it all. So I can just imagine him strutting around with his fancy coat and just bringing back bad reports, and everybody going, I just hate that little kid. But Israel, and notice we have a change of name here. Whenever we're talking about spiritual matters, Yaakov's name switches to Israel. The rest of his life, he will be Jacob and Israel, just like the rest of us. When I'm focused on this world and all the problems that I'm dealing with in this world, I'm just that regular person in the flesh. But when I'm focused on the things of God, I have a different name, which is my name, Isabel. So all Jewish people have two names, a name that they use in the synagogue and a name that they use outside the synagogue. And it comes from this particular idea. So the brothers saw, of course, that Yaakov loved Joseph the most because he was of his mother, Rachel. Even though Leah had produced 6 kids, all boys, and then 1 daughter, so what? The one he'd always wanted was Rachel. So he has a couple of interesting dreams, and in both of them, everybody's bowing down to him. I can imagine telling that to my mother when I was 17. That would have gotten me a, shut up, who do you think you are? And basically that's what his brothers wanted to do to him because he was cocky. He was self-assured. And even his dad is going, son, you're getting a little bold here. But when we get to 37:11, we see a connection with something in the New Testament. His brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept the matter in mind. Somebody in the New Testament was given a prediction about bearing a baby and who this baby would be. And Elizabeth also gave Mary a prediction, a prophecy, about who her son would be. And she kept this matter in mind all of his life and thought about, is that prophecy coming true? And we know that Joseph's dreams will come true. All the dreams in Joseph's life are 2. So he has 2 dreams here. Then when he's in prison, the cupbearer and the baker have a dream each. And then when he comes before Pharaoh to interpret his dream, Pharaoh has 2 dreams. So each of those dreams will mean the same thing. So now we get to 12 and 13, which we think, so Israel, not Yaakov, Israel, the spiritual part of him, says, why don't you go check on your brothers? Oh yeah, this is just the kid you want to send to check on the brothers. 50 miles away. They were 50 miles away. This is not the kid you would think you want to send. But he said, go. And he said, sure. I'll bring my notepad and I will make a lot of notes, Dad. So he says, go see if things are shalom with your brothers. And I thought, they haven't been shalom ever since Joseph was born, you know. But here's an interesting thing in 15. A man found him wandering around in the countryside. Who is this man? It's not like there were signposts and directions and AAA and trip guides and GPS. So he's going, anybody seen some sheep that might belong to my brothers? But a man finds him. Interestingly, by Shechem, where they had murdered all of the adult males. Nice place to visit. And he says, well, I'm looking for my brothers. Have you seen my brothers? And this guy doesn't even need, they're Jacob's sons, they had this many sheep. He goes, oh yeah. They left here, they're over to Dothan. And this was 13 miles northwest of Shechem. So he gets to walk another 13 miles. So now he's 63 miles from home. Who is this man? What we know about angels is that the word can be translated angel or messenger. And we remember, we back up a couple chapters and we go, let's see, who was it that Yaakov was wrestling with all through the night? A man. What man? And in the morning, Yaakov says, bless me. I'm not letting you go unless you bless me. So he understands that this is a divine man in some way or another. And because the divine being names him, he says, this is God. Because only God has the power to name you. So, who's this man? I'm open to your ideas. Matt has the microphone. Just raise your hand if you'd like to share on who is this man in verse 15 of chapter 37. The whole story hinges on this man. Claude?
Well, since the Holy Spirit leads us to things, I get the feeling it's the Holy Spirit.
Okay.
I have heard from biblical scholars that when the term the angel of the Lord is used as opposed to an angel of the Lord, it's referring to Yeshua in an Old Testament appearance.
We know that the Spirit of the living God is all through what we call Old Testament. And we know that Yeshua was present at the beginning, right? He was in on creation. The Word was with God. And so those are both very good ideas. If not for this man, Joseph would have gone home. And we wouldn't have the rest of the chapters of Genesis, would we? You know, we could just quit here at chapter 37. Okay. So they spot him and they said, let's kill him. Let's kill that stupid, dreaming brother of ours. They just really love this kid. And we'll just say some wild animal devoured him. And then we'll see what comes of all his dreams that we're all bowing down to him. Ha! So he has really got the love of his family, and they are backing him. Like, not at all. The rabbis say the wild animals are who? His brothers. Wild animals kill for food. We can kill because of all of our passions, envy, hatred. We have no moral compass at times. Now, Reuven is the oldest of the sons, and he feels responsible for the rest of the brothers as the eldest. And he says, no, listen, you guys, we shouldn't kill him, no. Let's not shed his blood, let's not be Cain and Abel. Just throw him into this dry cistern over here. Probably had scorpions and snakes in it. It was the off season, so the water cistern wasn't filled, but it wasn't pleasant. Now, the editor puts in, at 22, in parentheses, he intended to rescue him later. He didn't know how, but he was going to do it. So they say, okay, well, we'll throw him in there, but the first thing, we're going to destroy that coat. I'm sick of him parading around in that coat. What we know from later in Torah is that he was screaming and pleading and begging, please, please let me out of this pit, please, I'm sorry. But they went off and ate their lunch. And presumably, Reuven was off tending the sheep. I mean, somebody had to watch the sheep while other people ate. So now son number 4, Yehuda. In verse 26, 27, Yehuda says, we don't make any money off of this deal. There's a caravan over there. We could sell him to the Ishmaelites. There's a good idea. Make some money. And what's interesting is even though he's the 4th son, his brothers paid attention to him. Reuven has made several mistakes as the oldest brother, and he's no longer leading the brothers. This 4th son is. Yehuda is the line of Messiah. And so we always want to watch what Yehuda is up to. So now we get confusion, and I'm not going to go into all the confusion about whether it's the Midianites or the Ishmaelites that pluck him out of the cistern, then sell him to somebody else, then take him down to Egypt. But somebody exchanged a ½ pound of silver shekels, and Reuven goes back to the cistern, sneakily, going to throw him a rope and get him up, and goes, oh no. And then he says, hey, brothers, he isn't in the cistern. And of course they're going, of course not, man. We took care of that. So he goes, what are we going to do? What are we going to tell Dad? And remember that Yaakov fooled his father with goat skins? They do the same thing with a goat, don't they? The goat is killed and its blood is put on the coat, the special coat. They don't even have the guts to take it to Dad themselves. They send off somebody else that says, do you recognize this? And of course he recognizes it. And he says, my son has been torn to pieces. And he's right by his brothers. And Yaakov will not be comforted. In Judaism, you sit Shiva for 7 days. Then you sit Shiliach, which is 30 days. And then you have 1 year. And after that, you are supposed to really seriously return to living. You are not allowed by Jewish society to continue to mourn. You need to move on. Yaakov does not move on. He says, no, I'm going down to the grave mourning. Nothing will comfort me. So now we get to chapter 37. I wanted to see the preliminary to see, or 38. 38:1. Yehuda leaves his brothers. Why? That question is open to you guys. Why does Yehuda leave the whole family unit? His 10 brothers that are left, his sister, his father, the whole camp, he leaves. He's no longer hanging out with his brothers. Anybody got an answer to why he leaves his brothers? Dead silence. Okay, thank you.
He probably felt pretty guilty coming back home and he didn't bring the last brother back with him, and it was all his idea to get rid of Joseph.
You know, guilt is a terrible thing, isn't it? We know that Yaakov is just sitting around crying. His eyes are swollen. His face is ashen. He won't eat. He can't sleep. And the brothers are all looking at each other like, should we tell Dad? Should we tell Dad? Should we tell Dad? You're the one that suggested selling him. It wasn't me. It was your idea. It was your idea. I don't know if you've ever been in those situations, but I have been in those situations where the guilt is killing me. And until I get things straightened out, I've got problems.
It's an interesting concept, guilt. The fact is, he did wrong trying to do a little bit of right because the brothers were going to kill his brother.
Mm-hmm.
So he says, oh, let's sell them and gain from this. So I'm going to do some right, but I'm mixing evil within it.
Mm-hmm.
That never works out well.
I've tried that so many times. The end does justify the means, doesn't it? Claude.
Compromise never works out, especially when it comes to spiritual things.
Yeah.
God is black and white.
Mm-hmm. And I can just think about Reuven stomping around going, it's your fault, it's your fault. I was going to rescue the kid. It's your fault. Everybody's looking at Yehuda, and he can't take the heat, nor can he take the guilt. So he leaves his entire family and settles with the Canaanites and becomes best buds with a guy named Hirah. And then he decides, well, I may as well get married. So he marries a woman whom we call Bat-shua, daughter of Shua, because we don't know her name. But we're well aware that for Isaac and for Yaakov, they were not to marry Canaanites. So here he is marrying a Canaanite. So again, he's just going, I don't care what the old rules were. I don't care what God told you. I don't care about being a special people. I don't care about being set apart for God. God hasn't been talking to me. I'm sure none of you have those rebellious thoughts, but I've had them plenty in my life. God wants it, I'm going the other way. Generally, that's when I get a 2x4, because I'm a slow learner. So she has 3 sons, and he says, well, I better, find a wife for the oldest, better get that started. So here's an interesting thing in verse 6. We don't know Tamar's ethnicity. Just says Tamar. Doesn't say a particular tribe. So the rabbis say, well, since this becomes the line of King David, we've got to clean her act up. So she must be related to the 3rd son of Adam and Eve, which would be Shem. So, yeah, she comes from the line of Shem, so she's a Jew. But nobody knows. And I'm okay to leave it at that nobody knows. So we don't know what this firstborn son was up to, but something evil, and God wipes him out. So we get son number 2, Onan. And you're supposed to sleep with your brother's wife, and raise up a son to get the double portion of the inheritance. And he goes, oh, no. The inheritance now is down to 2 sons. I'm not helping raise a kid to my dead brother. You can forget that. So he does what's called onanism, which is still a word in English. And he does not produce children with her. And God does not approve of that. So God wipes him out. So Yehuda says, this woman is one of those black widows. Every guy she marries, she kills. He never looks to see that his sons might be evil. That clearly does not occur to him that there could be anything spiritual going on. He just goes, she's a wicked woman somehow, and she's poisoning them or something. So he, by law, he has to give her to his third son. But he says, he's not quite grown up yet, so go back and let your father support you for a while, which was not kosher. He was supposed to financially support her. So she goes back home, but she is still legally married to Yehuda's family. She has a legal status as widow. So she's in limbo because she realizes he's never going to give her to son number 3 because he's afraid. So we see him as a deeply unspiritual man right now and really unsettled because of what he did to his brother. And I think there's some God blame going on. You know, if you hadn't put that kid in our midst, I wouldn't have all these troubles. You know how that outward projection thing is? I'm not the problem, everybody else is the problem. Because we don't see any reflection here. But it's going to be critical later on that he mature and become a man of deep spirit. So how's that going to happen? Unfortunately, God's method is to give us trials and tribulations. Not the method I would choose, but it's all over the good book. So, a woman helps him develop character. That sound familiar to anybody here? Any of us gals? Anybody like to testify? Because we're meant to help the other half. We are. It's supposed to be a partnership. So Tamar says, I think I've got a plan. Because I can see the lay of the land here. And Tamar clearly had friends. She had people that were running to her house and telling her stuff. So somebody says, hey, your father-in-law is going up to a big sheep shearing party. You know, they're all going to get drunk every night and, you know, have a wild time. He's going up there to celebrate. And, you know, it's the end of the year. The sheep have survived. They're going to get the harvest of the wool. So, what better time to talk to him? So in 38:13 and 14, Tamar was told, your father-in-law is going up to Timnah to shear his sheep. And she takes off her widow's clothing, covers her face with a veil, and sat at the entrance to Enaim. Enaim means 2 eyes. That's going to be interesting because somebody in this story doesn't see. Of course, I never have that problem. So Yehuda sees her at the crossroads, and that's generally, if you're a common prostitute, that's where you would be hanging out, right? Meeting the traffic, coming and going. So she has her face covered, but she's a woman alone, which means she's available. And he says, hey, you know, what are you charging? And he's not subtle, you know. What do you pay for me to have sex with you? Rather blunt. And he says, I'll send you a kid goat. How about that? That'd be a pretty good price, right? And she says, well, I'd like your credit card first. Your seal at that time is your credit card, and it's your driver's license. It is your personal seal for all business legal transactions. And you hung this around your neck with a cord. It was a round cylinder of clay, And she said, I'd like that thing hanging on your neck, and then that shepherd's staff that you've got there, because everybody got theirs carved, and made in a way that was distinguishable. I'd like those little items that you've got. Until the kid goat comes, and then I'm happy to give them back to you. And he says, deal. So they have sex, and he goes on his way happy. And she immediately takes off that veil and puts back on her widow's clothes and goes home. Okay, that's that part of the story. And Yehuda sends the kid goat. He does his part, but he can't find the woman to give the goat to. Now, you only know this in the Hebrew, you don't know this in the English. Yehuda says she's a zonah, which is a secular prostitute, just your common streetwalker. But the guy who goes back says, has anybody seen a religious cultic prostitute? For like the goddess Astarte, one of the fertility cult priestesses. And so he asks the wrong question. He doesn't say, has anybody seen a common prostitute around here? He says, has somebody seen a religious prostitute? And everybody goes, haven't seen one of those, no. And so he goes, well, takes the kid goat back. Oh, well. He returns to Yehuda, and he says, I could find her. They said there hasn't been any Kiddushah, a holy prostitute here. And Yehuda goes, oh, well, whatever. Let her keep the stuff. I sent the kid goat, but you didn't find her. 3 months later, guess who's starting to fill out? And of course, everybody notices, ooh, kind of pouchy belly there, honey, under those black clothes. You been up to something? Because you are still a legal widow, honey, and you are promised to a man. So anything you've been up to is adultery. And apparently there aren't any trials in those days. There's no defense attorney, no prosecuting attorney. 38:24, Yehuda said, bring her out and let her be burned. Simple as that. This is the guy who said, let's kill him. This is the guy who said, let's make some money off of him. So at this point, we don't see any redemption, do we? Do you have any compassion towards this black widow? He wants to leave her in legal limbo forever. What did women have to support them back then? Was there Social Security? No. Food stamps? No. You had your husband and your children, and that was it. She would be left to starve by his plan, or to become a common roadside prostitute. So that was his future plan for her, his daughter-in-law. Now I'm open to getting a little feedback on this guy. What do you think of his character so far? Raise your hand to give me a thought on his character.
I find it interesting that he was okay with just having her keep his prized possessions. I find that interesting, that he didn't care about those either.
Personally, I think he's a creep. Other than that, no, I find two things interesting. In fact, you just made me think about something. It seems like, first of all, you said she was on the roadside as a common prostitute, but yet when we went back to look for her, he didn't ask for that. He wasn't trying to find her. Second of all, seems to me there was another guy who didn't treasure his heritage very much either. He was hungry one day. So I just see a repeat process here.
Clint? I'm sure you have a thought or two. Go for it. Yeah. Clint. All right.
I'm like, here we have the case of somebody who's guilty of the very sin that he's ready to burn her for. He is an adulterer. Period. But his sin is apparently acceptable, and she needs to die by fire.
Yeah.
Yeah, so not cool.
Real fair standard there.
Yeah.
So this guy needs some character refinement, right? And God has it right on the agenda. So when she's brought out, verse 25, she sent this message to her father-in-law. I'm pregnant by the guy that this signet ring and staff belong to. Now, the rabbis make a big deal out of the fact that she does not shame him publicly. You know, she doesn't march down to his house and go, hey, here's your stuff, man. You know, you were going to leave me to die destitute. She just has these things sent by a servant. And Yehuda could have said they weren't his. He could have said, never seen that stuff in my life. But he acknowledges. Can you imagine what a big swallow that was? To go, looks kind of like my stuff. Well, I think I was up to something 3 months ago. She is more righteous than me. The word righteous in Hebrew is tzedakah. Tzedakah means mercy and justice combined. She is actually showing him some mercy by not shaming him publicly to the whole town. And she is getting some justice. So she is more tzedak than I. Because I did not let her become my third son's wife. And I was wrong. And here's the second half of justice. He never slept with her again. Because it would have been very wrong. And he observed now sexual propriety. He is the founder of the line of David. He didn't look like a promising candidate when he started out selling his brother down the river, literally. But this woman has intervened in his life and changed it. If she's more righteous than him, he also has to think about why his two sons are dead. And it means it wasn't due to her. So he has to revise his opinion of her. She has twin boys. Lots of twins in the book of Genesis, aren't there? There's lots and lots of twins. And here, just like Jacob and Esau, we get one trying to push its way out. They tie a scarlet thread on that one, saying, okay, that's first. Then the other one slides by and says, okay, I'm going out. And then she says, how did you break out first? So he was named Peretz. Then came the brother with the scarlet thread, and he was given the name Zerach, scarlet. Peretz is the ancestor of David. If we go 7 generations down, we're going to get to the story of Naomi and Boaz. they produce Ovid, who is the great-grandfather of David. So we have two non-Jewish women in the 10 generations before David. Both of those women are legal widows, and they have to make the men do the right thing by them. When Naomi lays on the threshing floor at the feet of Boaz, she doesn't just uncover his feet like her mother-in-law said. When he realizes there's a woman there, she says, "Spread your garment over me," which he totally understands, to do your kinsman duty and make me your wife. And Tamar is also getting justice from Yehuda. So we have two legal widows who change the character and the story. If we didn't have them, we wouldn't have had the David that emerged. And I think of both of those women and what they brought to his life. So I would like to get your feedback on Tamar and Ruth. Okay, the microphone's back there. Just raise your hand. These are two of the women ancestors of David. What did they add to his character? I'd say Ralph, but he's busy studying.
So here we have two, obviously, there would be Gentile women. And then we also have the story of, Rahab, who was not the picture of
Yeah.
chastity. And I just think it's so amazing to me. I was telling Tariq the story yesterday. She calls, we do video chat, right? And I was giving her, she has a friend named Bathsheba, okay, one of her best friends in Israel. And we were talking about names, and her other friend's named Miriam. And I was telling her in the Bible who's named Miriam, who's named Bathsheba, and I was giving the whole story of David and everything, and with Bathsheba, Bathsheba. And I'm like, isn't that just something, how God just throws it all out for us? Like, he gives us all the dirty. Like, he doesn't hide any of it, right? Because he doesn't want us to hide who we are from him. And in the lineage of Messiah, we have stories that if this was man-made, no man would ever put their garbage and their sins and transgressions in there. But God does, because he takes us as, the Yehuda or the imperfect Tamar or the Rahab or whoever, and he changes us. And I just think it's such a beautiful thing that our God shows us humanity at its worst, but then he shows us redemption.
Yes, it does.
That to me is, it's like a great testimony that not only is this true, because it goes against human nature, humans hide who they are, but to God's grace and mercy, and how we can see ourselves in these people, and we can see how God brought good out of it, and how he brings good in our life when we submit to him.
Amen. Anybody else on Tamar and Ruth?
So the question was, what did David gain from his lineage? And from Tamar and Ruth, I think you can really see the stories and see the tenacity and the courage that David got. David started as a shepherd boy, found himself being chased through the mountains by a murderous, raging king, and had to protect himself. And I think, it's in those moments. Yes, David made massive mistakes, later in his life, for which he was punished for. But in the time where he was in the mountains, in the time where he was told, hey, you're going to be king, which, by the way, he did maybe learn from Joseph, he didn't tout that around. He was pretty quiet about that. But from his maternal, from the matrilineal side of it, it takes guts to sit in a cave and know that God is going to protect you. And it also takes tenacity to hang on to that relationship with God, knowing that you will be at some point king, even if you don't know how that's going to happen. And he had the opportunity at some point to kill King Saul, and he decided that it wasn't his decision to make, that it wasn't his job to take out King Saul. And again, that's huge. That's hanging on to God and believing in his word and his timing. You just don't get that if it's not built into you in some way, shape, or form. So I think that's kind of probably what he got from those two.
Thank you. I appreciate that because both women had tenacity and they were determined to have children with the men of Israel. They were determined to be part of God's family. It's pretty amazing. You know, Tamar had no future. There was no future for her. There was no future for Ruth. And both of them said there is going to be a future. And frankly, they have to have believed in God, the God of Israel. That's who sustained them and kept them alive and kept them focused on the goal. I don't think this was just a physical striving to have children. This was a goal to join the people of Israel and serve that God. In chapter 39, we get the wicked woman. Oh, do we have a raised hand? Okay, go for it.
Something else you need to take into consideration, they both knew the law.
They did.
They knew
Good point.
where they would stand when certain things happened. And that's where we get ourselves in trouble, is when we don't know what we can stand on. We don't know the law. That's why we need to study.
Amen. So many people tell me, well, I only follow the Old Testament moral law. And I go, what part of it is moral? I think the kosher food laws are moral. God figured out the best food for us, and so why don't we follow it? No. Why do we have to figure out our own way? Speaking as one who has done that many times. But I think all of the Torah is moral. So I can't say, well, this one on honoring your parents is moral, but that one on this, I don't need that one. And I go, well, I need all of them. I can't obey all of them because I'm a limited human being. But I want to have that foundation. When we get to chapter 39, we have the evil woman, don't we? Potiphar's wife. And so we know that she tries to ruin Joseph. And he gets thrown in prison for allegedly trying to rape her. What I find very interesting is when Potiphar is told by his wife, oh, he tried to rape me. It just says in the Hebrew, he was furious. Normally, furious has an object, furious at. I think he was furious at his wife. He had a real sweet deal. He could come home, kick back in the lazy boy, and do nothing. And now he was going to have to train a whole new household manager. You know, he had it sweet. And it's very clear that he did not believe Joseph was guilty because he could have slaughtered him right then. There weren't trials. You try to assault my wife, you're dead. But he puts him in the nice royal prison, you know, the deluxe one with the really nice weight room, swimming pool, gourmet catered meals. This is not your common county jail here. This is deluxe. And even there, he rises to the top. All through Joseph's life in Egypt, I mean, I'm sure he's going, why did this happen to me? Anybody ever been there? I have. Why is this happening to me? Why is this happening to me? And Joseph had that question all the time. But he rises in Potiphar's house. Then he rises in the prison. Then he rises to second man in the entire kingdom. And finally, when he reconciles with his brothers, his father, Yaakov, has all sorts of conversations with God, doesn't he? I mean, he's at Beit El, he's at Beersheba, he's at Peniel, and God's talking to him. God never talks to Joseph. But what does he say when he reveals himself to his brothers? I see. You didn't send me down the river. God did. Oh, but that was good. He sent me to preserve life. Can we believe him when we don't have a personal revelation? Can we carry on trusting that we are serving his kingdom, we are serving his people, and continue to do good? Because God has sent us. And that is foundational for every one of us. And I'm going to wrap it up at that. And thank you so much for studying Torah.